Welcome to the Purpose Focused Advisor, a podcast for financial planners, advisors, and RIAs looking to get the most out of yourself and your business. Join Rob Brown as he walks you through a journey that will allow you to take action in your business and your life so you can be the best that you can possibly be. Now here's your host, Rob.
Welcome back. It is time for the Purpose Focused Advisor. Rob Brown here with my special guest, Lauren Hong, who is the founder and CEO of Out and About Communications, a marketing firm that specializes in the financial services industry. And she is also the host of the On Purpose series podcast, on which I was fortunate to be a guest. And one of the things that I learned from that podcast is that Lauren likes to dig deep and share lots of great information, and she asks great questions. And I think it's because I learned that her father was a journalist, and so I'm looking forward to flipping the roles here today, Lauren, and being that journalist and asking good questions and digging deep to see if your father taught you how to answer questions as well as you ask them. So welcome to the podcast.
Oh my goodness, Rob. Thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be here today.
Yes, it's going to be a lot of fun. So as we dive in, tell me a little bit about, why you focus on financial services and why that's so important to you.
Oh my gosh, always that's a big question, right? Of kind of the why. It's funny. I think like most businesses, when you start, you don't totally know where you're going, and we were a case of that. We shouldn't be because we're a marketing agency, but we were trying to figure ourselves out in the early days, and we maybe I can't remember, it might have been year 2 or somewhere around there. We started working with an RIA client, and we did a really good job for them. And through the process, I was like, my background's graphic design. And I was like, okay, I started to learn and started to see a lot in this industry from a visual standpoint. You kind of got a lot of navy, black, brown, gray colors, but in financial, services in general kind of feel dry. I was like, this is a really fun challenge. Like, how do you jump into the deep end, really humanize this business? Because that's a lot of what it was. And so I saw this as kind of a opening to say there's a lot of opportunity in here that's, from a creative standpoint, really challenging. And that each business has their own personality, and to be able to bring that out and align it with the business objectives, that challenge excited me. And fortunately, it's excited our team, and it continues to excite us as we move forward. So we did a great job with that client, and then things kind of caught fire from there. And then, you fast forward, we built our team, our processes, so on and so forth, all around this industry. So yeah, that's the long and the short of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, and now this is about 12 years that you've been doing this and specializing in working with the financial services industry. And I think
That's right.
you said in your info that your clients range from $250 million in AUM all the way out to 20 billion. So it's a big range. But I want to go back.
Range.
But I want to go back to something that you said, because you mentioned that sort of boring blacks and blues and grays and browns. And I still see that all the time. When I go to an advisor's website that maybe is considering work with me in some way, that's where I check them out. And I'm like, wow, those are the same old colors. Why do you think? Why do you think that is?
I think just historically, it's been a more traditional industry that is a little bit more of kind of, I'll call it like playing it safe. And I think, whenever you're doing big branding projects, you want to kind of fit in, but you want to be just a little bit different. And so you can still play in that, if you were to take it from a color standpoint, that kind of color, those type of colors, but it doesn't mean that you can't still be different in the way that you stand out through the photography or the voice and tone of the copy or your target market or other things like this. And I think, especially in the RIA world, it's relatively new, as it's evolved and sort of identify itself. I think it's created opportunities to sort of branch out from there. And as a result, creatively, you can do that too. So it's changed over time. just like anything else. But I think the historical roots are just because it's a more traditional kind of buttoned up industry, if you will.
Right, right. And there are a lot of old guys out there like me who just that's how we got started.
Well, we all you all get started we're all kind of just going with it. So
yeah.
someone like me, I'm like, all right, I'm like, let's mix it up a little bit. So yeah.
So I have to tell you something funny. I
Yeah.
was on a phone call with somebody just a couple of days ago who wanted to pitch me on improving some of my branding. And
Yeah.
when he was doing that, he was flipping through my LinkedIn posts, and
Yeah.
he comes to the post where I shared when I was on your podcast,
Yes.
and
Oh
he
goodness.
said, "You need to look more like that."
Oh, hey, I'll take it as a compliment. I
Yeah,
don't
no,
know.
it absolutely was. So it was, but it was
Well,
funny,
so,
I wasn't even thinking about that as I was getting
you
ready
know,
for the show. But um, you mentioned the color thing, I'm like, oh yeah, there it is.
oh my gosh. Well, if it makes you feel any better, and so I'll say shout out to our team, right? We, when we got started, because we were kind of trying to figure out our own identity, it was actually just this. Now, in all transparency, we've gone through multiple website redesigns over the years. We've adjusted and tweaked just like any other business does. But in the more recent history, like in the last year, we've actually gone through a redesign ourselves. So part of that was saying, like, hey, we're feeling pretty comfortable in our own skin. Like, what does that look like and what's our own identity? So part of that experience was to really go, okay, who are we? How do we better service this space? And how do we show up that is, again, just like different, but we still fit in kind of thing. So it's kind of that right balance. But I appreciate you sharing that. So,
Yeah, no. So kudos to the rebranding you did, you
oh,
and your team
thanks. Yeah.
did for yourselves. Yeah, you showed me up.
Oh gosh. Well,
No, no,
you're
no. Anyway, no, I'm fine. But let's talk about identity, because as I talk to advisors in different firms, and we talk
yeah.
about what they're doing and why they um, put themselves out there the way that they do, whether it's in the words that they use or the images or the colors that they use. Um, there was a big number of years, and you've been around for those years, where having a big bold website with lots of stuff on it, so it's like the fancier the better.
Yeah.
And now it seems to be simpler, more succinct, but that identity
Mhm.
piece is so important. And
Mhm.
some advisors will say, well, I really don't care about my website. It's been 10 years since we did any kind of brand
Right, right,
evaluation or whatever, maybe not 10
right.
but 5, but some longer period of time. They said, but nobody cares because nobody looks at websites
Mhm, mhm,
anymore anyway. And
mhm.
to go back to the example I was using of your uh, of, of me being on your podcast and an image showing my website, the person that showed that to me says, I bet if we go to Lauren's website,
Mm,
that the identity or the image, the way it shows up there, will be the same as the background on that graphic for the podcast. And of course,
mhm.
he was absolutely right. So that identity is important. It's consistent. It goes across
Yep.
mediums. Why is that identity so important?
We have a really short attention span as humans, and sometimes it's really hard to just know, like, oh, what does that person do? Are they a consultant? Are they an RA? Oh, they service this community. And so you want to constantly point your message back to that value proposition, and kind of the what you do. So it just makes it, frankly, simpler for someone to remember you and to digest that information. So that can, I mean, think about like Kitsis, right? I mean, you sort of think of him maybe as a brand, but he's always got like the blue on this shirt. You're going to get a blue package. You're going to do all these sorts of things, right? So there's this consistency across the board, and the same is true with a brand. If it's a person, if it's a whole company or what have you, it helps to create that the memory, right, for folks. So that's part of it in a kind of simple terms.
Right. And I think that's something that can be unappreciated, because you don't necessarily look for it, but when it's there, it helps attract
Yep.
people. It helps it stand out.
Yep. It's so
So,
true.
Lauren, as I was looking at your website and some of the accomplishments that you've had over the last 12 years, one of the things that you mention is that you continue to score an 85% NPS. And I wasn't
Mhm.
sure, but so I had to double check and make sure I knew what NPS
Yeah, yeah,
stood for, Net Promoter Score. And
yeah.
obviously,
Yep.
that's something that you highlight, and you highlight it because you're proud of it. Talk about Net Promoter Score and why that's so important to you in your business. And then let's dig a little bit deeper and using that as a way for the audience, for financial professionals to be thinking about
Yeah.
how they could, uh, whether they measure the score or at least or think about why that methodology is important.
Yeah, so a net promoter score is where it's really a client satisfaction score. So it helps you to understand how satisfied your clients are. And the higher the net promoter score, the higher opportunity that you're going to have for, referrals and growth and client retention. And so it's kind of linked to a whole variety of other factors. So it's a really important score to measure. I know that some firms will actually run this net promoter score on their own. Others will use, like if they're a dimensional client, I believe through some dimensional client surveys that they'll include a net promoter score. You probably have seen this. It's a question it reads something like this. What would you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate X company? So you have, 1 is your lowest number and 10 is your highest number. And so I think if it's an 8 or higher, they're promoters, and I think it's a 6 or below, something thereabouts, they're detractors. And then everything in the middle is the neutral. So you take the percentage of the promoters minus the percentage of detractors, and you get your net promoter score. So when you track this year over year, it's really helpful because it allows you to have like a company-wide score. And then for an advisor, what you can do is you can actually slice out the data. So you can say, okay, well, X advisor is associated with all of these clients. And so you can have a client specific or an advisor specific score, if you will. So that's kind of helpful because you can see what's our firm-wide score, what's our advisor-specific score to maybe see where there's some gaps, like high performers, low performers. And we've seen this data be really helpful because not only is it kind of give you like a pulse of overall are clients satisfied, but then what it will allow you to do is if you add some follow-up questions that are usually light and breezy, like, how could we improve our score or any other comments, just very simple survey. It allows you to garner information so that you can really lean into what's currently working, why they gave you that score, or things you could do better. And I constantly hear a kind of drumbeat of a message from firms that are growing, which is really, we listen to our clients. When we listen to our clients and we give them what they need, and we're constantly working to make sure that they're happy, we're also growing as well. So we've taken that score. This isn't exclusive to the, financial services, REA community. Tons of businesses use these scores to be able to help them identify customer satisfaction. So it's a great tool for advisors to use, frankly, of any scale, to get a pulse on the health of the business. So
Yeah,
we run it once a year. I see folks run it as much as twice a year. You don't run it like every month or something like that. So
sure, sure.
yeah,
So as you are working with your clients, is that something that you help them implement and do as part of
yeah.
your work? And how does that influence the way that you then would continue to serve a client that maybe got a high score or a not so good score?
Yeah, so depending on like kind of the engagement and where it's at, I'll say that the deeper we're working with a client and the bigger they grow, the harder it is to unlink operations and marketing. They're very closely intertwined, in how departments work across the board. So you almost can't not stumble into operations questions as companies are growing. And so one of the questions that I often get from leadership is like, help us improve, or they'll say like, help us kind of like, you look under the hood of a lot of other businesses, what should we be doing? And so sometimes these questions, if they're not already doing or running a net promoter score, will come up, especially if there's not a lot of measurables, or if they're looking for a measurable for, I'll call it just kind of a a good solid methodology, proven methodology to be able to get this information. So we have helped putting together surveys, but it's much more on the, I'll call it the branding component of it. And we can provide some kind of general guidance on best practices for what we've seen firms use across the board. But we're definitely not like survey experts, and we're not conducting heavy research related to that. We're more on, we can provide that kind of, I'll call it consultancy guidance, and we can help put together a nice looking survey and help suggest distribution cadences for firms.
Yeah. And I think that's really important because too often I think advisory firms measure their performance based on their assets under management or their revenues. And sometimes it can be
Yep.
really difficult to dig deep into why those things are growing, and they have been for several years in a row. So it's kind of,
Mm-hmm.
for some people, it's hard to remember that there were ever years that things went the other way.
Yep. Yep.
And so having an alternative way, and I get asked this often by clients. So what else can we do to
Yeah.
really measure what we're doing and how we're doing? And that simple survey, that net
Yeah. Net
promoter
promoter score.
score can be just a great simple way to reach out and get some feedback. Um,
Yep. Yep.
but but the pushback I get is, but what if I get some information that says I'm not doing a good job? How would
Yep.
you react to that question?
Oh my gosh. We get that sometimes too with Google reviews. Like, I don't want to promote it because I could get I could get someone that's a detractor that's going to, give me a 1-star review, and how do I handle it? Um, and same thing with net promoter scores. I think the great thing about a net promoter score, unlike a Google review, is that, it's not public to the world and that you can address it. It gives you an opportunity to address it and get ahead of it before it gets ahead of you. And then sometimes, I mean, I've seen situations where you might have a big fish of a client and you didn't know that they were unhappy. And this is your opportunity to jump in. And that big fish might be connected to 3 other big fish, right? So it could really knock you off from a cash flow standpoint and what have you, because you're not delivering, or it might remind you like you've got to work to continuously earn that relationship and to be able to add that value. So it really gives you an opportunity to look specifically at a singular client, but then across the board to be able to say, I'm starting to notice a pattern here. And, I thought from a strategic standpoint, we should be going this direction, but this is telling me, nope, this is a really big priority. And if I don't get hold of this, then, this could cause a kind of a fallout effect. So I'd encourage people to do it. It is kind of scary. Especially like the first time you do it, and even like the follow-on times, it's kind of like, oh, like you're like, don't keep hitting refresh, because it keeps like the data's coming in, you're like, I got more results, but it's good because it really helps you to get a pulse on not just your intuition, but where you can improve.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Well, I'm glad we
yeah.
spent some time there, because I really think the points you're making are so important to be able to measure some trends. And if something negative gets said, it's better to know it than not
Yep.
know it, because you can't fix a problem if you don't
That's
know
right.
that you have it. And too often, those are the nagging problems that persist and then kind of to grow in a way that just continues to fester. And
That's
you can
right.
eliminate that if you can hit it more head on.
That's right. Yep.
So let's kind of change directions. I'm curious, as you're um, talking to prospective clients, I know now, a big part of your role inside of your firm is to get out there and do business development and meet new people. What are the burning issues that the firms that you're talking to have? What are they trying to solve for that you really think is most important? And maybe you could say, maybe if there's a difference between what they think is most important versus what's the underlying problem, you could kind
Oh
of give
yeah.
us the the insider secrets and not the.
Yeah. I hear a lot of folks that come to me that are kind of hands up, like, we're not marketers. We don't know what to do with marketing. Someone help us. We don't know how to pull this all together. I hear a lot of that message when I'm out there talking with folks, and I get it, right? Like, I'm not an advisor, I am not in that seat. Um, but what I often see once we get into it, that may or may not be, it's of varying degrees as sort of underlying problems or challenges, is it really comes back to the clarification around the business direction, both where you want to take it, your service offerings, and really being clear on your target. And when you can kind of start to put together, I think, some of those pieces, it helps to the marketing to do the best job possible. Because ultimately, when you invest in marketing and you're looking to go up market, you're looking to really professionalize the company, whatever it is, because that's usually when folks come to start working with us. I know earlier you mentioned kind of 250 to 20 plus billion. Usually firms will start working with us where they're, under 500 million, or they're just right around that threshold to a few billion. That's usually kind of our sweet spot of a lot of the firms we work with. If they're kind of, I'll call it like 5+ billion and up, they usually have in-house support, a few people on manpower or more, and they're usually coming to us because they need additional thinking, they need additional arms and legs. But what I see in kind of that, I'll call it like 500,000 to a few billion mark, is that the way that they got to that last threshold isn't the way they're going to get to the next threshold. And so a lot of it is a conversation around the business strategy. And then our responsibility is to say, okay, we can see what size of shoes you want to step into, and then we can start to design around that. And that clarification helps us to then be able to help really with the positioning to be able to either go up market or really to attract that ideal client. So we can also kind of pull in that right client, but then start to create that lifetime value for the business itself. So those are some of the, I'll call it more of like the underlying things that often get kind of unpacked as we work through a marketing strategy engagement together. So
because as firms are growing in that space that you're talking about, marketing, I think, shifts from being something that you're kind of pulling behind you to something that can lead you. It goes
that's
from kind of,
exactly right.
it's a lead indicator. If you do it, you get it right. You're going to
That's
be
right.
attracting that ideal client, no matter what your underlying strategies might be. Am I saying that right?
That's right. And I think one of the challenges too is there might have been historically, it's usually the CEO or someone, is one of the founders, kind of a key rainmaker, right? And so they're used to sort of marketing being a lagging effect because they've got the network and they've started to build it. But now it's like, how do I foster that growth culture? How do I position the company as that leading piece of it? And really set it up, like I was saying, kind of that lifetime value to be able to really grow out the business. So not just as an individual, but collectively as a team. So
And I think that's such an important point because, as I'm working with clients, one of the things that we're constantly focusing on is how can this business carry on what that founder or founders created.
yeah.
And too often, they're so invested in the business, and maybe there's a little bit of unhealthy ego around this place, wouldn't survive without me.
Right,
it's
right.
it's that marketing and that strategy that can take what that founder has done and done so well and memorialize it in a way through marketing, lets that
hmm
culture, that whatever it was that created that success, to expand.
That's right. We've worked with several firms that were kind of, I'll call it the early onsetters within the RA community, and they've had a founder that's changed hands, right? Like they've had younger leadership that's bought over the firm, and they're stepping into that next generation, in some cases, several generations out. But this is an opportunity often where we've come in and we've really worked with the new leadership to be to be cognizant of the leadership from prior, but really say, okay, where do we want to take this, and really kind of taking it and shaping it out as it steps into the next phase of the evolution of the business. So but yeah, you're spot on with all that.
Yeah, no, I just think it's so important to think of, because I know some of the advisors listening to this are, I think it's easy to get confused by marketing because marketing and marketing strategy is sometimes sold as, let me rebuild your website,
That's
or
right.
change the colors or something
hmm
like that, and that's just
hmm
a piece of it. Um,
Hmm.
um, what does a marketing engagement look like with you? So somebody comes to you and said, "Hey, Lauren, we need some help. We know we need to strengthen our brand and
Yeah.
improve our identity because we really want to leverage what we've built so we can get to that next level of success and have marketing be a
Yeah.
big part of that."
So it depends on the style of engagement, but regardless, every account that we're working on, we always, just like in this business, we always start with a discovery. And frankly, I think sometimes people think, oh, the discovery will be asking, questions about social media channels and favorite colors or something. We don't even talk about any of that. It's so high level related to the business, the operations, where you want to go, SWOT analysis, which are really trying to understand the more of the core of the business, because really the marketing strategy plugs directly into that. So we always start with our discovery. Our second meeting that we have is really around the strategy alignment to really take that conversation, put it into an organized framework, and start to poke holes in it to really help us flesh out whatever the next deliverable would be. Sometimes that is getting started on a website redesign. Sometimes it's identifying low hanging fruit that needs attention to. It could be a key deck that we're working on, or it could be a rebrand or something of that sort. Other times it's really looking at putting together like a full on marketing strategy for a firm to really scope out a variety of things for the next year plus, and what that could look like from, I'll call it your kind of drumbeat of activities. It might be, e-newsletter or blogs or that sort of thing, and major initiatives on top of that. So just depends on the size and scope, but regardless of where it sits, we always start with the pretty, the big business picture, and then we let everything else plug into there. So,
Right. And I think you mentioned on your website that your average client is with you more than 3.5 years. So
oh yeah,
you have some long engagements. And I
yeah,
point that out because I think too often, because of the fast paced world that so many advisors live in, they think, well, I just want to turn this into a 3 month website project and then be done with it. There's
yeah,
scale and there's scope, and there's so many little pieces that you just mentioned, the social media piece, the newsletter piece, and having all of
yeah.
those pieces fit together. And you don't have to do it all at once. It can be a
That's right.
strategic plan that you can layer into over time so that
Mhm.
it fits your time capacity, it fits your budget capacity,
That's
whatever
right.
it might be.
Your needs, yeah. We've been in business for a dozen years, and we've got some clients we worked with from the beginning, that are still working with us, and some outgrow us. Others, there's just all different sort of shapes and sizes for their needs, and so we've really from the beginning have never really been a like one size fits all shop. We're very much designed to meet the business where it's at, and then kind of color the engagement accordingly. Um, so to your point, it doesn't, nor should it all get done in one compact period of time, right? Because the business is evolving, and there's always needs and changes as it evolves. So
Yeah, that's thanks for kind of adding to that, because again, I think that is so important because I believe that marketing is underdone by a lot of advisors and advisory firms because it's all in a rush, or it's a package or a product that is sold versus doing that strategic alignment that you talked about,
mm,
which is a process very similar to what most of the advisors on this who listen to this
yep,
podcast do when they're talking to a potential client um,
yep,
for their
that's right.
business. So
Yeah.
it's about time to land the plane. So I want to end with a couple of things. First, what are questions that advisors may be asking themselves right now about their
Mm,
businesses that would where the answer should be maybe it's time to do some strategic analysis of our marketing. So what questions might they be um, kind of coming across in the everyday world?
mm. So if you've just gone through any kind of consulting work, or any kind of exercises, target market planning, business strategy questions, those sorts of things, it's probably it probably opened up some sort of door to talk about marketing. So I think that an important question for teams is making sure that the teams you're working with are aligned on putting resources behind a marketing initiative and starting to talk with people to understand what does that actually look like. And as you're talking with people and you're doing that discovery yourselves, you start to learn that there's not really kind of apples to apples comparisons of different agencies. So I think before you even talk with someone, it's important to kind of get clear to the degree that you can, kind of what you're looking for, if it's fit or personality or kind of deliverables or lessons learned in the past or things like that, is you're kind of trying to vet out those next steps if you're looking for a partner. So, and I should say, we also put together, I can share the link with you. It was actually a Kitsa's article all about outsourced marketing. And there's a whole bunch of checklist of different questions and things like that might be resourceful for firms. So,
yeah. So, and that really leads me to my last question, which is if an advisor or a financial firm somebody from a financial firm is listening to this podcast, like, I think we need to talk to Lauren and her team. What's the best way to do that? And then if is that resource, the one you mentioned just now, we'll make sure we put that in the show notes. But what else should they know about contacting you?
Oh my goodness. Anyway, we've got our website. There's a contact us form, hello@outandaboutcom.com. Shoot me a note on LinkedIn. But I think that the most important thing is as you're going through this process, just want to be here to be a resource. We've had kind of, I'm sure you can appreciate, Rob, when you're kind of in this consultancy space, you look under the hood of all different shapes and sizes of companies, you get a completely different vantage point. So if we can be of a resource to help guide folks, happy to be that resource. But the best way to get a hold of us is probably just going over to our website at outandaboutcommunications.com.
Great. Well, Lauren, I really appreciate your time today. It's been another great conversation with you. I can't wait till I come back on your podcast again, or you come back on this one, because it seems like I appreciate the way that you think about what you're doing in your business is the way that I want advisors to think about their business and the way they treat their clients, the way they think about their business, having some purpose and some focus behind what they do. And I think that's maybe another reason why this space is so attractive to you, because there's a real like mind, even though you're doing something different in the way that the advisors think, in the way that you have put your company together.
Oh, I so appreciate you sharing that. It's such a human to human business and taking care of people. And I think at the end of the day, that's what matters. So, I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, to our audience, thank you all for listening in. We'll see you again next week. And remember, we're always rooting for your success. Take care.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Purpose Focused Advisor. If you want to learn more, head over to our website, truestfancoaching.com. There you'll learn all about becoming a purpose-focused advisor. You'll also find today's show notes and links to the other gifts and resources we talked about during the episode. Again, thanks for listening, and remember, we're rooting for your success.